Hey everybody, Happy New Year. Welcome to the Den of Sin with Devin and James. I'm Devin Lucas, and as always with me is my co-host, James Dufresne. How you doing, James?
I'm doing good, man. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to. We're deep into the. We're not deep into New Year's, but we're more than a week. But happy to be doing the first episode of the new year.
Me too. We've been planning this one for a week or so now. This was intended to be a New Year's thing, so I'm going to keep it a New Year's thing.
Sure.
And our topic today is actually kind of related to the year that we are living in.
Yes, very correct.
What we've chosen for this week's topic is actually, it's probably not as abstract as I'm making it sound, but it is for lack of a better way of putting it, the Charlton Heston Apocalypse Trilogy.
There you go.
Yes, this Charlton Heston did 3 films from the late 60s and into the early 70s that kind of ran off of similar themes. And these films, I'm sure everybody's ahead of me now in calling these out, but the films are Planet of the Apes, The Omega Man, and Soylent Green. And the reason that we're going for these 3, or actually the reason why we're going for this topic in general, is because the post-apocalyptic world of Soylent Green is actually 2022 within that story.
Right.
So yes, we're going to celebrate our Tuesday's Soylent Green Day times here.
Oh my god! And it's actually, we are recording this on a Tuesday.
Did you get your Soylent Green today, James?
I missed out, but
yeah, they ran out. All I could get was a kilo. Because apparently that's how they weigh it. That's what the lady was shouting in it anyways. All I got was a kilo. So apparently by 2022, this dystopian America has been converted to the metric system. I didn't know that was... Yeah. Now, I don't know. I'm assuming you're a fan of these films, but maybe not the biggest fan of Chuck Heston.
Well, yeah, I mean, as a person, Chuck and I don't think would see eye to eye on a lot of things, but I guess I'm not uncomfortable to say that I'm not big into, Bible movies, and, Charlton Heston, 2 of his most famous works are both Bible-related films. So those aren't necessarily movies that are close to my heart, but, he's always been I think for guys our age and definitely older than us too, he's always been a presence, and he definitely has his own charm. But I think I only really give a shit about his work just because of these specific movies and, and a few others. But yeah, I mean, I feel like while, maybe these weren't the films he was most proud of specifically, the films of his I like the most. And I have differing opinions on each 3 that we can get into, but yeah, definitely fan of the films, not a fan of Chuck Heston, the dude, I guess. But
I get you. I hear you. Anybody that doesn't know, Charlton Heston was a very outspoken conservative, and oftentimes said things in ways that were intended to provoke. But I will say this for him: every single story that I've heard about this guy, in terms of just as a human being, really nice guy, definitely a person that was able to put his political leanings aside in order to have a good conversation. And there was literally nothing he would not do for his fellow actors. He was actually president of the Screenwriters Guild, or not. Sorry, that's not screenwriters. That's my thing.
Yeah,
he was
actors,
president of the Screen Actors Guild from 1966 to 1971. So it actually covers some of the period of time that we're going to be talking about these movies. But yeah, he really went to bat for actors, and he did not give a shit if they were hippies or whatever. Mm-hmm. Actors were people, and yeah, so interesting guy, very complicated guy. I'm going to go with just being glad to hear that he was very nice behind the scenes, very respectful. Yes. And like so many other provocateurs, tended to keep some of the more provocative things for statements and ways of getting attention rather than personal conduct behind the scenes. But a couple of interesting things I did learn about him. I only bring these up because I don't think people knew these things about Charlton Heston, and I'll be interested if you do. I did not. First off, Charlton Heston is not his name. So I followed that rabbit hole, because who the fuck names themselves Charlton Heston if they don't have to? like I didn't think Charlton is even a name.
Well, that's the thing, is I've always thought it was such a cool first name, but I'm yeah, it's such a weird.
It's a great first name for him, but I mean, he went by Chuck. Everybody called him Chuck. But his real name was John Charles Carter. He changed it because John Carter was from Mars and he was not from Mars. But he was born on October 4th, 1923 in No Man's Land, Illinois.
Interesting.
For one thing, could that have been the start of some of his post-apocalyptic?
I was going to say very relevant to this tonight's topic.
The other thing I was going to say, and forgive me, I've been saving this line for a week now. Was Charlton Heston born in a Tom Waits song? Because No Man's Land, Illinois sounds like something Tom Waits would have recorded sometime around 1978.
For real, yeah.
The other thing I found about him that I thought was absolutely fascinating and does actually tie into these films as well was that Heston narrated highly classified Department of Energy instructional films, particularly ones relating to nuclear weapons. And for 6 years, Charlton Heston held the nation's highest security clearance, a Q clearance, giving him access to like the utmost of top secret information in the United States, and followed this by making Planet of the Apes. So it makes me wonder, did he know something that we didn't know? And then the other thing I found interesting about him that I thought people might get a kick out of was that apparently during the Waco, Texas, David Koresh compound struggles, one of the plans that they had things not gone the way they had, was they had Charlton Heston come in and record messages to David Koresh, quote unquote, in the voice of God, to play into the Waco compound, I guess to kind of trick David Koresh into thinking he was hallucinating. But this is a real thing. Like, he actually recorded it. I would love to get it. It was never used because things went a very different way. But
and also it's an asinine idea. Like
it never would have worked. But I love, that somebody what would that be? The FBI? There's someone in the FBI said, "Get me Charlton Heston. We need the voice of God."
Yeah.
Which speaks to all the biblical epics that
exactly.
you're talking about. Anyways, we're going to try to keep this a short episode. We're short on time here, and this is a pretty packed full trilogy. So we're going to get things started off with, of course, the aforementioned Planet of the Apes, the first in the Charlton Heston Apocalypse trilogy. James, where did you first discover Planet of the Apes? What was your entry to the planet?
I mean, obviously born, as old as we are, Planet of the Apes is something that was, pretty prevalent in pop culture as long as I can remember. Whether it was one of the films or the TV series like the Migos. In fact, I think that honestly, if I think my very first exposure of Planet of the Apes was that probably seeing the Migo action figures, very famous action figure and toy company from the 70s and very, very early 80s. They sort of really launched boys' toys in the United States. And Planet of the Apes was on. What's up?
I was going to say, partly due to the popularity of this.
Yeah, I mean, it was the superheroes toy line, the DC and Marvel heroes, that really kicked it off. But one of their strongest ones originally was Planet of the Apes. It was actually Planet of the Apes, Star Trek, and the Mego superheroes that really made them the number one toy company in America until a little launch of a thing called Star Wars.
Which Mego passed on too, right? Like
which are with Marty Abrams very notoriously passed on. He goes on. He's very defensive about this topic and said that he didn't pass on it, that he was abroad, and that it's a whole thing. But either way, famously, Mego passed on it or didn't pick up the license, and honestly, that really did that one decision pretty much killed Mego. Although Mego's back today, they're in toy stores again, putting out some very Mego-ish product. I still buy. In fact, I greatly appreciate what they do. They are the first American company to ever license the Hammer films for toys in the United States. So happy about that. Anyways, staying on topic. But yeah, Planet of the Apes was something that was really prevalent as a kid in the United States. Like the TV series, maybe not as much. It wasn't like I was aware of the TV series and watching it, but the films were constantly being, aired all the time. I remember being a little scared by it as like a little kid. There was an energy to it. I was scared by Planet of the Apes and by Kiss, both of which had Mego dolls. But probably saw the first film in its entirety mean, I probably watched, but I think Beneath the Planet of the Apes was probably the first one I saw in its entirety. But I mean, I didn't go through the film series until I was in my 20s. I did buy the Blu-ray collection that came out a few years ago. I have a very distinct, I have distinct feelings about Planet of the Apes that we will get into when we talk about it more deep. Some of the things that, like, even though it is it's considered one of the most important sci-fi film franchises of all time, and rightfully so and stuff. But there's some things that, having rewatched them recently, where I'm like, how come I never thought about that before? But we can get into it. But again, they're very fun. I actually like some of the later films. They get real weird with it. Maybe more than the original, which I think for some people is a little sacrilegious. But what about you, Devin? What is your experience with Planet of the Apes films?
Man, I actually have a pretty deep history with Planet of the Apes.
I'm sure, yes. I think we've discussed this, but
yes. Well, I mean, I saw it growing up like everybody else did. I can't even point to which one I saw first because they were just kind of on the rotation. They were an easy get for like movie of the week for the TV networks back in the day. So
exactly.
And Sunday afternoon runnings of any of the original or the 4 sequels. But I got really into the original again, thanks to a common friend of ours, Zeke Steer, who I haven't seen in a long time. But Zeke Steer and I ended up watching Planet of the Apes one night. We got really into it, and like we ended up, we both went out and bought the book, which the actual title is. See if I can do this. La Planète des Singes, which is Planet of the
Monkey
Apes
Planet.
in French. I found out the translation is Planet of the Apes. For some reason, it's called Monkey Planet in the UK. I don't know why. Yeah. Why make the change to Monkey Planet when there's not a monkey in sight in the whole thing?
Well, that's one of the things historically that everybody makes fun of, and it's Planet of the Apes sounds like something serious. Monkey Planet sounds like a kid's cartoon. Like it sounds stupid. So
it sounds like a new Discovery subchannel, and
now I will say, when you bring up the novel, there's like a lot of differences between the film and the novel, and I think some of the changes were actually for the better, but we can get into that later. Before I will let you finish talking about your sorry for interrupting, but tell us about your deep history with Planet of the Apes. Sorry.
Well, it's all good. I'm actually looking forward to what you have to say. And that's just the novel by Pierre Boulle, who also wrote the novel for The Bridge on the River Kwai, which is insanely different. And Zeke and I, we read the novel, we enjoyed it, we noticed the differences, obviously. But then there was a Planet of the Apes screening at the Cinema Star near our house, where they used to have a lot of midnight movies when you and I were in high school, or I think you were out by then, but I was still in high school. And Zeke and I went in, and we had gotten chummy with the people that run it, and we asked if we could actually read the novel La Planète des Singes. I mean, translated in English. We asked if we could read the novel out loud in the cafe attached to the theater, and they allowed us to. And we did the whole thing. We switched off. I did chapter 1, he did chapter 2, and so on down the line. It took us several hours, but we read the whole fucking thing in the voice of Charlton Heston, because it is written as that character's diary.
Taylor's, yeah. Or no, I think his name's different.
It's not Taylor. I can't.
Yeah,
it's been so long,
different.
I can't even remember what it is in the book. It's something else that's like very American sounding. I know in the original screenplay, Rod Serling named him something else too, and then Taylor came about later. But we were kind of obsessed with Planet of the Apes, and then I played again at another theater about a year later, and Zeke and I went again, but this time Zeke made me hold him on a leash like he was my human.
Jesus Christ.
I love Zeke, but man, always wanted to take the joke just the step too far. So he went into the mall parking lot just acting like a savage human, and then we went out and bought a ticket, and there was like maybe 2 people in the theater. So it was like there was no point to any of it, except for it made Zeke happy, which was worth it for me because he was a very good friend. But we had a very close relationship to Planet of the Apes, and ended up having whole marathons of the series, and of course the second one also co-stars Charlton Heston. I don't know how far we're going to get into the sequels, but I feel like only the first film really belongs in the Heston trilogy, since he's barely in the sequel, which was by contract. The main thing I'll say about Beneath the Planet of the Apes, nothing against James Franciscus in the lead. He was fine, but Burt Reynolds was considered for the lead in that. And I think that if you, again, nothing wrong with James Franciscus, but if you took him out and everything else remained the same, except for that Burt Reynolds played that part, I think we would be discussing right now which was the better movie.
I probably agree. Yes.
And it would have changed the trajectory of the entire series, because my guess is that they wouldn't have done part 3 the way they did part 3 if there was a chance of getting Burt Reynolds back.
Yeah, I agree 100% on that.
Now, you mentioned something about the book and having some sort or the writing of it.
Well, specifically, so in the novel, and then apparently in the Rod Serling original screenplay, the Planet of the Apes is an advanced civilization. So it's a futuristic, they have flying cars and shit like that.
They springboarded from ours was the idea, and continued.
Well, I think I don't know if it's the Rod Serling. No, I think it's the book. It isn't Earth. That's a complete thing for the film.
Yes,
they are. Right. Yeah, but it's like an advanced civilization and stuff. I think it was budgetary restraints. I'm assuming, but I think setting it like almost like restarting civilization, and the fact that I love 70s sci-fi, and that's something that we will definitely get into in this episode tonight. I love the charm of dated science fiction and technology, but I think it gave it a different vibe, and I think it doesn't root it in the 70s version of the future as much as it could have, and I think it also having it be more of a primitive civilization, or a much more organic feeling civilization. The theology of it, the religious aspects of it, also make more sense. But I'm sure there are fans of the novels that don't like that opinion, or don't agree. But to me, as somebody who watched the film first without any knowledge of the books or whatever, hearing that, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'd like that as much. I mean, maybe there is some version of that that original Rod Serling script that might make an interesting movie, but I do think I think it's cooler. And it makes the film more classic, that it isn't like monkeys and, fancy sci-fi suits and, flying cars and whatever. But that's just my own personal opinion.
No, I agree with you. I think that the more primitive setting is actually much more appropriate for the story that they wanted to tell. I would love to get my hands on the Serling script. It has been turned into a comic book, I believe.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was adapted by, what's his name? The comedian, the same comedian who does the Dr. Zayas show. There's a new Dr. Zayas show where he interviews celebrities. Oh God.
Wait, what? I'm not.
You've got to look this up, and it's he's a well-known comedian too. What the fuck is his name?
Hold on, I have access to the internet.
I meant to write this down.
Dana Gould! It's so funny. I almost guessed Dana Gould because he's he loves horror and old sci-fi movies and stuff.
He's a great
Oh my God, I have to check that out.
Yeah, it's really funny. The Dr. Zayas show played by, I don't think they give Dana Gould credit on the show. I think you're supposed to guess that it's Dana Gould and just feel that it's really Dr. Zayas. But I think Dana Gould also adapted Rod Serling's screenplay into a comic book series a few years back, so that people could kind of get an idea of it. Yeah, and nobody knows for sure where the twist ending comes from in terms of finding out that they're all on Earth. But it's got Serling's fingerprints all over it. It's such a Twilight Zone ending, and some people who have worked on the film, according to Dana Gould, told him, that was a Serling touch. But Serling had them, in a more advanced society, where it was more advanced than ours, even partly because of the physiology of the apes. Like they didn't have to wait for a light to cross the street because the crosswalks were hanging. They crawled, swung across, things like that. So it was organic to apes, but an advanced society nonetheless.
One of the limitations, obviously, in the film version is that it's obvious that these are humans in ape masks, and that is not a discredit. There's actually a documentary just about the special effects of Planet of the Apes, and it's fantastic. It's very interesting because it was very revolutionary, and it is incredibly well done. But again, these are human-sized actors. They're human. They have, it's very obvious that it's just humans in ape masks. where I will say that one of the things I will actually give credit to the Tim Burton film is that they went to. I mean, first we had Rick Baker, really, who was a big fan. That was, I mean, one of his inspirations was the original Planet of the Apes films, but he made them. It was more of the physicality of the apes and stuff. And apes are incredibly powerful. One of my favorite things on earth is to constantly Google hairless apes and hairless gorillas too, or hairless apes and chimps, but also hairless kangaroos, which are weirdly muscular. But you see a hairless chimpanzee. You see, like, the BJ and the Bear chimp, and he's just a cute chimp. But then you see it without hair, and you're like, it's all muscle. It's all bulging muscle. And you're like, oh, this is why they can rip our faces off. But so that's the one thing about the film that's always bothered me is that, in multiple films, you have humans sort of fighting with apes, and, the humans would get torn apart like tissue paper. That's a weird hang up of mine. But the one thing is that the film lacks is that, it doesn't have that, like you said, society adapting to the physical attributes of apes and how much more faster, stronger, agile they are. So but again, for the sake of a 70s science fiction film, Planet of the Apes is still an accomplishment and still does, like I said, I still enjoy it. I actually think Heston is great in it. I think the most, even more than I would say, because again, Ben-Hur or the Ten Commandments, whatever, to me it's quintessential. Get your dirty paws off me, or whatever. I'm actually fucking up the fantastic quote, but keep your hands off me, you damn dirty apes. But it's Charlton Heston at his most Heston, and his most iconic is over the top. But specifically to me, like, the supporting cast of Planet of the Apes is really where, not evilness. Would you consider Dr. Zaius evil? Or is he just?
No, in fact, I think I found this to be a running theme through all three of these movies in this unofficial trilogy, where there really isn't a villain in any of them. There's an antagonist, sure, but usually the antagonist has a really good point that is better than Charlton Heston's point in the film. But because of the zealotness of the antagonist character, they've always taken it a couple steps too far.
That's a really fantastic point. I sort of was. That is a fantastic point. Yes, I agree. That is a very good insight. And we can definitely talk about that. But to me,
I think I just real quick to cap that thought.
Absolutely.
And to tie it into something you said. I think that the fact that the apes live in like these huts and live in this weird sort of like future past, because it seems like they have electricity and they sure as hell have like medicine and operating tables and things, museums. To me, it seems like Zaius is deliberately trying to keep certain elements of their culture in the Dark Ages because Zaius has the truth in the Forbidden Zone and what happens to cultures that get too culturally advanced. So therefore, I do think, like I said, I think Zaius is actually doing the right thing in trying to keep his culture from becoming as self-destructive as man did, but he takes it too far and kind of holds them back in this weird era. I don't know.
Also there's the zealotry and
the fake religion sort of
exactly. And just if the roles were reversed and we humans were doing what they do to humans, we did that to apes, using them for target practice and all these different things, these awful things that the apes do through the films, like it would be, oh my god, what are you doing to these poor apes? But so there's that element of it too. But one thing that bothers me about science fiction films specifically, that it really bothers me about this movie, because there's certain science fiction films, especially ones that take place on alien planets, you can get away with hearing English because you can say, oh, it's the common tongue. And Star Wars does that. Like, when you hear English people, that's like common space. They call it common, and that's why even in Star Wars, there's some aliens that need to be translated because they're not speaking common, but what we're actually hearing isn't actually English, but whatever. But in this movie, the fucking apes speak English. So right away, if I'm Taylor and the other astronauts, my first question is, how the fuck are you speaking English? Of all the you're supposedly thousands of light years away from Earth, how are you speaking English? Like, if that's not the first clue that you're on Earth, it irritates me to no end. And I understand it's a conceit of not only just the times of the 70s, but just science fiction in general, because getting over that hump of language, I know, can be just trying to explain, but it irritates me to no end because it would be different if they're speaking English, but when you see it from, Chuck's point of view, they're like, speaking gibberish. But no, he can. That's one of the main plot points, is that humans can't speak, and he gets shot in the throat, which is also stupid as fuck, because normally that will kill you, but in this he just gets him a little hoarse. But it's just that's the whole plot of this, is anyways, that irritates me to no end. But I was rewatching.
I get it, and to be the book, the apes speak a different language, and the Taylor character still is injured and cannot speak, but he uses that time to learn what they're saying to communicate with them.
See, that's what I'm saying. That would have been wouldn't take me out of the movie as much. And then if you watch it as a series of films, you forgive that shit because it goes. I mean, but the other films and stuff. I still haven't watched. I've seen things about the TV series, but I haven't watched it in its entirety. So it's on my thing of things to do is to someday watch the show. But
I've seen some of it, and I've seen even more of the Saturday morning cartoon, which is almost LSD heavy. I really enjoyed that one.
Off topic, real quick. Have you ever? We've never really talked about Star Trek. I don't know what really about your feeling. I know a little bit about, but just for the first time, because it wasn't something I watched as a kid. I couldn't give a shit less about it as a kid. The animated series, the Star Trek animated series is so fucking good.
Oh, I love it.
So good, and it's a continuation of the original series, and I mean all the voice. It's so there's episodes that I'm like, these are great. It's just random aside, but I need to.
I know. I got on my cell phone right now. I've got. I can call up right now the voice of young Spock from the animated series.
I love it.
He's a buddy of mine.
Really?
Yeah. Going back a long way. Well, he works for Dr. Demento, but he's actually the one that I met who got me in touch with Dr. Demento.
Oh, that's amazing. Cool.
Yeah. Anyway, we're running low. I don't want to miss out on these other two movies while we're trying to make a short episode. I do have to take us out of apes. I do have a trivia question for you, just random. Do you happen to know what the first word spoken by an ape on film is?
I do not.
Smile.
Really? Okay.
When the gorillas are taking a picture with the kill from their hunt, and the one who's taking the pictures tells them all smile, which he's speaking English and telling them to do something that a gorilla can't do. So hopefully that doesn't add more to your agitation.
Just a little bit's fine. Real quick though, before we move on, I gotta say that
yes, please do.
Roddy McDowell is my favorite character in the movie. He just
easily took it the most seriously. Was just...
Well, that's the thing is, again, I heard from everybody is that he was just the most lovely human being on the set, and just was but Cornelius is so great, Zira's great, Kim Hunter, the cast of apes is so good in this movie that I will say Nova. Well, then we'll talk about that too, because there's in each one of these movies, Charlton Heston, who was already middle-aged at this point, was teamed up with women a quarter of his age or half his age, and some very lovely women.
That seemed to stroke his ego quite a bit, and
yes,
I still see it. It's still very obvious when you look at stuff with even modern stuff with Clint Eastwood, or it was there was a rule that Cary Grant had that Burt Reynolds followed because he loved Cary Grant, but I haven't seen many of the others follow. But it was oftentimes the studio who said, well, we want a movie star, which means somebody established and older, but then we want somebody young and gorgeous to fall in love with them. So Cary Grant created a rule for his films that the young girl always had to come on to him, and that he had to be kind of
put off by it a little bit,
put off at first and then fall into it. His idea being, well, I would rather not do it at all, but if I'm going to have to do it, I at least don't want to be the aggressor in the situation.
Very good.
And so that was a bit of advice that he gave to Burt Reynolds, and you can see Burt Reynolds for the most part follows it, but Burt Reynolds also was wooing 20 some odd year olds into his 50s and 60s on film, And Charlton Heston seemed to always be into it. Clint Eastwood still always seems to be into it. And I think that's,
well, even in,
I think it's the psychology. These guys are good-looking guys who have been stars for decades. And Clint Eastwood could be 500 years old, walk into a bar and get laid. And I think that's what he tells himself is like, well, why wouldn't this person be into me? I'm
so, but at the same time, first off, he looks like the goddamn crypt keeper now. But
that's true, unfortunately. But
in his newest movie, in his newest film, which he really looks old. I'm blanking on the name of it all of a sudden.
Cry Macho.
Yeah, Cry Macho. He does hook up in the movie with I mean, she's an abuelita, but she's gorgeous and still probably 20 years younger than he is. But I found that even, at least in the other one, in the one before that, he was having threesomes and shit. But anyways, although even in Cry Macho, the very attractive, I think, was it, I'm forgetting the actress who plays the psychotic mother.
The mother, yeah.
She comes on. Anyways, that's a whole, we should talk about the subject at some point. But anyways.
We should.
But yeah, Planet of the Apes, I think really, it's probably the most important of the three that we're talking about. It was a culturally phenomenon.
Important, yes. Which is why it's worth taking a little extra breath to talk about it. It is not, actually, depending on what day you catch me, I might have different favorites out of these three. But most days that you catch me, my favorite of the three is 1971's The Omega Man.
That is very funny because it's my least favorite of the three.
Is it really? Okay, I have to. I mean, I love them all. Going in.
Yeah, so, I like them all too.
But yeah, I'm actually very interested in finding out your reasons for this.
Well, let's talk about it. So it's the second of three films based off the Richard Matheson novel I Am Legend. It's not the least faithful because they all, even the one co-scripted by Matheson, which was the Vincent Price Last Man on Earth, isn't that faithful to him. I mean, it is faithful. It's the most faithful of the three.
It's the most faithful, but he still had he couldn't have his name removed, Richard Matheson, so he had his name changed.
Yeah.
So, he's credited but not credited.
So here's my thing. The Omega Man, which has just one of the coolest names. Before I ever saw the movie, I knew I wanted to see it because I just love the name The Omega Man. Just sounds dope. It almost sounds like, some like dark superhero. First off, to me, the movie is very uneven.
Yeah, I'll give you that. I'm not saying it's my favorite because it's technically the best. It's technically the worst.
Yeah, I would say it's the worst too. The first half, in fact, the opening sequence and explaining about the chemical warfare, that stuff is really interesting. When you see Charlton Heston on his own in the city, and especially, takes place in Los Angeles. I don't give a shit what decade it is. Seeing Los Angeles empty is just impressive.
Yeah.
But and they were doing really interesting things at the beginning where he's hearing the phone ringing and having conversations with statues and just showing his isolation, the fact that isolation's kind of driving him a little crazy. But then it's sort of there's just a lot of the family, the villains in this. When I first saw them, I thought they looked cool. They're basically essentially albinos in hoods and sunglasses, in robes and sunglasses.
Zeke and I would call them mad albino monks.
There you go, mad albino monks, which is dead on. I hear people refer to them as vampires. I'm like, that's a liberal use of.
They're vampires in the book, and they're vampires in other versions in other movies.
Yeah,
they're not vampires in this at all.
They're albinos. So yeah. But they're really not very scary, and I think that was my thing, is that they're just sort of. In fact, I'm forgetting the actor's name, but the guy who he's basically the main bad guy, the head of the family.
Anthony Zerbe.
Zerbe, yeah.
Who I love.
Yeah, but
Matthias.
Matthias. I was trying to think of the character's name, but it's almost, I don't know. I find it more funny than I find it scary or intimidating. But there's some cool stuff in it. The young lady, I'm blanking on that actress's and her character's name.
Rosalind Cash.
Thank you, Rosalind Cash. She's very of the time. She's very much blaxploitation type character. All of her dialogue, which I'm sure was written by a white guy, is very over the top and very of the time.
Yeah.
But she's she's an interesting character, and the actress is doing well enough in the part. But then I don't know, just when she all of a sudden magically at very convenient time, she turns into one of the mutants. They're just, I don't know. There's some interesting.
They even made a costume decision on her that was simply to make the unveiling moment more
Yes, I know. Yeah, yeah.
Because she puts on like a shawl or something.
Oh, yep, and,
she puts
and sunglasses
over and sunglasses on her head to go out.
Yep.
And then later on, it's this this shot that goes around her as you hear the family approaching, and you're thinking, oh, she's in danger of the family, but she starts unwrapping everything, and she's become an albino as well. And it's a cheesy shot, and it's going to be hard for me to defend
baby powder and just threw it in her hair. It really
is. But you're 100% correct. It is not a great movie. It's directed by Boris Segal.
Katie Siegel's dad.
Yeah, Katie Siegel's dad. The things about him, it's like things like that, like being big, Katie Siegel's dad, are more impressive than his filmography. He was a TV director. Horrible helicopter death.
Yes.
He was getting off a helicopter, looking down at some script notes, and turned left when he should have turned right.
Turn right. Which is one of the first. I mean, that's something I never actually think happens, but then yes, you can get. I think he was partially decapitated, but the fact that anyways, very crazy. So there's some interesting things about the movie, and I think to your point, the fact that the mutants have their own point of view, and the fact that humans fucked everything up, and very similar to Planet of the Apes.
It's always man at fault in the Chuck Heston post-apocalyptic
movies. Yes,
it's always man's fault. Which is dead on, in my opinion.
I find it really interesting because it ends in a way that you don't think, especially for a Chuck Heston movie. There's some very overtly religious overtones, especially at the end. The ending is my favorite part of the movie, just because I think it goes to a place that's a little unexpected. What about you, Devin? I mean, I've said my piece with the film, but what about you? What are your feelings on it?
Well, it does go dark, and I think it goes dark in ways that Planet of the Apes doesn't go dark. And I had a different thing to say about it, but I'm gonna this was not a sequitur thought, but it actually does have a strong black cast for a movie about the last man on Earth, which was Heston's doing. So yes, there's a younger woman who's falling in love with Heston, but first off, he's like one of 3 specimens that she has to fall in love with, and and in this case, she is a Rosalind Cash, a beautiful black woman from the time, which gave us one of the very first interracial kisses on screen.
Yes, and which is, I guess, something that this was one thing I read that made me is that Charlton Heston was very proud of that fact. He was, yeah. So I mean, again, I'm not. I don't want to speak ill of the dead. So it's not like he was a monster. He just loved his guns, maybe too much, but it's fine.
Well, well, she said she had a hard time with it. In fact, I have a quote here. She says she had a hard time being the love interest because, this is the quote, "It feels strange to screw Moses."
That's right. I think I read that same quote or heard that same quote. Yeah.
So I do freely say that I love this movie and that it's one of my favorite things to watch, but it is perhaps disingenuously, it is a little bit more along the line of a mystery science theater kind of movie for me. I love Charlton Heston's sort of, when he's driving around in LA at the beginning of this in his beautiful red convertible, he looks like he's going off on a casual apocalypse safari.
Well, so it's funny because the first part I actually think is really well done. I think it's well shot.
The first half of it's brilliant. It really falls apart in the second half.
And it's funny because I'm honestly, when part of me was did somebody else take over this movie, or did it get ruined in the editing room because it feels so uneven? But the first half is great when he's sort of speaking to himself, and it's just really interesting and it looks cool. But then
going to see Woodstock again, held over for 3 consecutive years.
Exactly. But yeah, it goes from feeling I don't know, it just at the end it feels like an AIP picture. It just feels like this
absolutely. I think you just nailed it. It feels like an AIP picture, and it's definitely a big budget
studio. Or should have been, yeah, exactly. But I mean, that's not to say I don't like it. I do like it. I think it is interesting, and I think there's a certain charm to it, especially as it's gotten older, where you sort of can embrace a little of the sillier aspects or a little bit of the low budget aspects or the limitations of the budget or the the effects of the time. I mean, but it's a fun movie. I still think of the three, and I mean, I can't even say that because I've never seen I Am Legend. I have no inclination to see I Am Legend.
I have no interest. It's nothing against Will Smith or the movie, but I've already got 2 other versions of this novel to choose from to watch for fun. And I'm going to pick Vincent Price or Charlton Heston over Will Smith.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, the Vincent Price film is slow, but I don't know. I think
it's got its charm.
I like it though. I think it's my favorite of the 3 because
I think it's artsy.
Yeah, exactly, and it feels more isolated. I mean, it feels more like
he feels more like the last man on Earth.
Exactly.
And it feels like he's not on a safari when he wakes up. Like when Charlton Heston's Neville wakes up, he's like, what am I going to do today? I'm going to go around. I'm going to search for some new cool clothes and go and catch Woodstock again. Whereas when Vincent Price's version of the character wakes up, I think he even says the line, okay, time to survive another day.
Yeah, that's right.
And like goes out hunting and like hunting the vampires. And like every day isn't just I get to be clever. And on Sundays I dress for dinner.
Exactly.
Like, it's like seriously like, nope. I go out and I kill vampires until I find the leader of them. And then when the sun goes down, I go home and drink.
That's right.
And try to drown out the screaming. And you really get much more of a tortured feeling from Vincent Price. And I will say about, in terms of the book, I Am Legend, there is a version of the film I would love to see that never got made that predates Last Man on Earth. It was going to be called The Night Creatures. It was penned by Matheson himself, was going to be produced by Hammer Films and directed by Fritz Lang. Director of fucking Metropolis.
Yes,
a Matheson novel. That's amazing to me. And I bet Peter Cushing would have been Neville.
I would have. Oh my god, dude! I was rewatching the Tales from the Crypt, the British Tales from the Crypt.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, and dude, it's a good movie. It's cool. It's a good movie, but head and shoulders above everybody else in those short stories. The Peter Cushing performance is just goddamn. And then I also recently watched Star Wars.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm literally staring at a doll of Cushing is Van Helsing right above me. So let's take. I think we've said our piece about the Omega Man.
All right.
This movie is why we were talking about it. It's 2022 is on the poster.
The reason for this season.
Yes, the reason for the season. I will admit I haven't. I was trying to like rewatch stuff. I haven't seen Soylent Green in. It's been a few years. So if there's things I forget or whatever, but I wish I didn't know the ending beforehand because I think that's
your fault for watching The Simpsons.
Exactly.
That applies to all 3 of these films.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, that again, I mean, exactly that. There again, it's 70s. There's a lot of things that date the film. In fact,
he's still on a casual apocalypse safari.
Yeah, exactly.
His handkerchief.
Well, we'll talk about the outfitting in the movie specifically, which is one of my all-time favorites. But I think of the 3, I think it's probably the most intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
It's more grounded in reality, science fiction than the other 2.
Easily the best director. I can give you a list of this director's other works that I think would blow you away.
I think I did. Look him up. Maybe I didn't.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to say this because it's not about the story. It's just I think you'd be. This is only a partial list, by the way. Soylent Green was directed by Richard Fleischer.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The son of Max Fleischer, the cartoonist. In fact, he had to take a day off to go to his father's funeral while they were shooting this. He directed His Kind of Woman, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, The Vikings, Compulsion, Fantastic Voyage, Dr. Dolittle, Tora Tora Tora, The New Centaurians, Mr. Majestic, Mandingo, The Jazz Singer, the version with Neil Diamond, Amityville 3D, Conan the Destroyer, and Red Sonja. And that is a partial filmography.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
So to say Soylent Green has a finer pedigree, I think is
very true. Then again, a phenomenal cast.
Yes.
Devin, I did some like I don't know if our listeners, but I decided I was going to do some of my own homework this episode. So tried to read some trivia stuff, In fact, I didn't even know until like I love the character of Saul in the movie. I didn't know until I actually looked it up or did research that it was not only it was Edward G. Robinson, the incredible Edward G. Robinson, but it was his last picture.
Yes.
One of my all-time favorite faces in Hollywood, Chuck Connors. He just has that face.
Yeah, Chuck Connors is amazing. Yeah. So weird in this too.
Yes, Tab. But yeah, it's one of the, I think of the three movies, it's the one that I would think about the most. It's got a very, I think now it's because it's become so cliche. It's like, and in a way, again, this is post How to Serve Man. So it's also like, it's not like there's nothing before it that has similar idea.
Right, and it's based on a book as well. All three of these are based on books.
All three based off books, exactly. Very, regarded science fiction novels.
And actually, I've actually read all three of these books.
Have you really?
I'm not a huge reader, but I have read all three of these books. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I actually, it's funny because I was like, I want to read this novel.
Fun fact from the novel that you don't get in the movie: Soylent is a compound of soybeans and lentils. Soylent. So, yeah, is there anybody that ever wondered where the hell that name comes from?
It's funny. It's funny because I didn't know that, but I sort of put that together. Like, yeah. The story is basically, so Charlton Heston plays, I forget his name, Detective something.
Thorne.
He's got a cool name. He lives with Saul, who they never really explain what they're. At least I missed it if they do explain it. But Charlton Heston basically lives with this older man named Saul, who they're both like. I don't know if Saul's a retired detective. Either way, he mentions
being retired. I think he was a teacher or something of that type.
But they're like life partners.
He's an intellectual. They are kind of life partners. Yes.
Yeah. And this rich guy gets killed. Basically, overpopulation is insane. Although I do
40 million people living in New York City is what they say at the beginning.
I feel like that's not that much further than we've gotten now. But
maybe.
Basically this rich guy gets killed and Heston has to go to investigate it. Meanwhile, there's one of my favorite, in fact, it's like, I think it's a scene in the movie that really stuck with me and really kind of explains is like, at one point he's traversing the staircase and it's just people he's like having to step over people in between people.
This is stepping out of his own home. Like
yes, exactly.
It's his home.
His apartment.
It's like they've rented out the stairs in front of it. Exactly.
And it's so, I could almost like really, I mean, in third world countries, that kind of thing kind of even happens where like livable, it's so, the movie it does a really good job of feeling overcrowded, of claustrophobic.
Hot.
Everybody's really dirty.
This one is the green message. The other two were war messages. Humans are going to destroy the world through war. This is the first humans are going to destroy the world through global warming, right? That at that time, I think they called it the greenhouse theory and all the other names they had for it back then.
You mentioned early, but it's big thing in this movie is that people can't get food. In fact, at one point, Charlton Heston basically steals food. It's funny because to me, I think it's actually, of the three, I think it's Charlton Heston's. He's actually acting more in this. Like he's playing a more believable character. He's not like a good guy. He does some questionable things in it.
He's an asshole on purpose in all three of these, by the way.
Yes.
Charlton Heston wanted the savior of man to be something of an asshole because he figured that was the character arc. The irony was that it was always the worst of them that had to save them, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean,
because he's so cynical about mankind at the beginning of Planet of the Apes too. Like he just looks at one of his fellow astronauts and is like, everybody you ever loved and knew is dead for 2,000 years. Like as if he's just, you want some gum?
Exactly. Now let me light up this cigar in the fucking spaceship. Jesus Christ.
But he's like that through all of these. And in Soylent Green, he's a cop. But almost every scene you see him in, the first thing he does when he gets to a place is try to figure out what he can salvage and steal. He's stealing whiskey.
Yeah, exactly. And but to me, though, that's also like it's survival, and he's using.
It is, yes.
He's using his. But yeah, exactly, and it's saying I think it's to illustrate that even in this, like cops are, this detective, he has some sort of authority and power in this. He has to steal to get. I mean, we're at the basically the end of civilization, but
But he's like, dead man's not going to use this steak.
Exactly. Steal some steaks and some veggies, and then takes it back to Edward G. Robinson, and they're like fucking ecstatic. The thing though I wanted to talk about, and I'll let you take it from here, but to me, one of the first time I watched it, even though it's like you said, exactly, it's like an environmental science fiction movie. There's some weird. I got that there was a very noir feeling in it.
Yes.
With the actual story, like.
I got that much more this last time watching it than I ever have before. I'm like, holy shit, this needs to be talked about as much as Blade Runner.
Yes, I agree.
This is a noir science fiction. This is very
and
much
the thing
noir
is,
science fiction.
The whole theme of it is very noir.
Yeah.
Powerless against the wealthy and the haves, and we're kind of
detective investigating the death of a wealthy man.
Yep. I do have to say, Nova, I think she was, even as a kid, I was like focused on Nova. But man, I don't know the actress's name. I think the character's Cheryl.
Cheryl, yes. She's played by Lee Taylor Young.
Lee Taylor Young, yes, thank you. Dude.
As a piece of furniture, by the way.
Exactly, basically, yeah, and that
should be brought up. You can't. It might be glossing over it for us to not bring that up. Like,
well, I was going to say, yeah, exactly. Like,
needs to be pointed out full front.
She's there to be used, basically, and it's very upsetting in a modern context.
Yeah,
but man, she's very attractive. But yeah, exactly, and Heston sleeps with
Heston takes advantage of her, but she falls for him anyways.
Yep.
And I think her idea. Not that this justifies him doing it, but I think her idea is like, well, this is my purpose. This is what I'm here for. And every man that I meet does this.
Yeah.
At least this one's nice to me after.
Exactly. Yep.
And he takes it because he's living in the post-apocalypse, and the only person he has regular contact with is Edward G. Robinson.
Exactly. Dying Edward G. Robinson.
Yeah. So I get it within the context of the story. It's a little weird because the story's definitely pointing out how bad this is, but yet still has its heroic character partake. So I don't know, I wish that I could talk to one of the people involved with it, just to get their opinions on that, because yes, obviously they're saying this is wrong, but then why does Thorne start their relationship with all right, come with me, and they go to the bedroom like it's just matter of fact, and they're called furniture. That's
exactly. Yep.
That's her job description. She is furniture for wealthy people. And when her owner is killed, who she liked her owner, he was a kind man or whatever, quote unquote, liked him, played by Joseph Cotton. But she's supposed to stay with the apartment until the next tenant. And then the next tenant gets to decide whether he wants to keep her or throw her out into the apocalypse, basically. So it's really fucking tragic and heavy, and it's a weird movie, but at the same time they're just as likely to play that element for laughs as they are for tugging the heartstrings. So it's an interesting dichotomy. I'm not sure they quite clear it.
I agree 100%. Exactly. I don't know if they get across whatever their message was, but even the thing where she's trying to convince him to stay in the air conditioning and all that stuff, there is this weird empathy for both of them in that situation. Look, you can have a shower. You haven't, which is also gross when you think, I haven't showered. And you're like, oh, you just had sex with that poor lady. But trying to turn up the air conditioner, and there's all these things that you're these people are living, even things we take advantage of hot running water and air conditioning. The wealthy have everything, and these people don't even have basic, human comforts. But it's definitely a weird scene, and definitely a weird aspect to the character. But again, like you said,
control the food too. That's the other aspect of.
Well, that's the whole
juxt
of this movie. And so, go ahead. What are your feelings on this film?
I love it, and the more we're talking about it, the more I'm going to say that today this is my favorite movie of the three. Because it's the one I've watched the most recently too. I mean, I've rewatched all three of these, but I watched Soylent Green last because I wanted it to be freshest. And it is the one out of the three that I've seen the least, but I think it's the one of the three that I'll probably watch more often going through. It's just incredible. First off, like you said, the cast, Edward G. Robinson, Chuck Connors, Joe Cotton, and Whit Bissell, who is a character actor that I've seen in a few things, but I just like to point him out because it's fun to say. Whit Bissell. um, but the Edward G. Robinson part really is that's the emotional crux of the movie. And that's why I really, truly love this movie. Heston's great. The story's great. Joseph Cotton's a fantastic actor, but he's really only in it for a minute or two. You get a feeling that he did a favor for a friend sort of thing, because he's the murderer they're investigating. So he's literally in one scene. But Edward G. Robinson is in quite a bit of it. And in this future world, again, spoiler alert, but I don't think there's any such a thing as spoilers to Charlton Heston movies. He decides that he's going to quote unquote go home. And what going home is in future 2022, it's like this huge euthanasia center where old people voluntarily check in, and they're taken to these beautiful rooms by people that look like angels, and they're made completely comfortable, which you just know that many of them haven't been in possibly decades. Lay them out in this big room filled with screens, and then they run on the screens all this footage from our world, nature, running water, deers, waterfalls, beautiful sunsets, all as the person is slipping out of consciousness and dying. The idea being that this is going home. And first off, Dick Van Patten in his first role is the guy who checks in Edward G. Robinson's character. And if you listen real closely, you can hear Dick Van Patten fuck up and call him Mr. Robinson when you say Mr. whatever it is. But so Edward G. Robinson, who was already fairly old when he was doing this, and looked it, and he was dying of bladder cancer, but he didn't tell anybody in the cast that he was dying of bladder cancer. Chuck Heston knew that he wasn't doing well and was good friends with him. He almost played Dr. Zaius, but he wasn't feeling up for the role in 68. So by 70,
they were really good friends.
He was also very good friends with Vincent Price. But Charlton Heston used to bring him like cheese and wine every day because he knew that he was in pain and he just wanted to make him feel better. And during that last scene where Edward G. Robinson's character is being euthanized and he's slipping into death, peacefully into death, Heston's character is watching all of this and he's crying. And those were real tears on Charlton Heston, because he knew what his friend was going through. And Edward G. Robinson was dead within 10 days, like before the movie.
10 days later,
so
heartbreaking.
Literally the last thing he shot was him going home. And especially if you were a fan of Edward G. Robinson and all the gangsters that he created, like, see, the big lips, like that kind of gangster, he created that. He was really an intellectual in real life, and that's why he was such good friends with Vincent Price. They used to talk art a lot. In fact, when there was a fire near Vincent Price's house, there was a line of people trying to be evacuated, and the police had to stop the one person trying to go into the fire. When they stopped them, it was Edward G. Robinson who rolled down his window and said, "I got to get up there. Do you have any idea what kind of art Vincent Price has right now? We've got to save the art." That's amazing. I didn't hear that story. That's crazy. That's awesome. I love it. And I know we're running low on time, so I'll kind of wrap things up there. But if anybody gets a chance to see Soylent Green this year in honor of 2022, it's the most even of all of these movies, even with its kind of casual misogyny at times.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, like, at one point, Heston's character joins, like, he gets sent off the murder case and he has to join the riot team, and they're fucking wearing, like, literally silver football helmets and like onesies, and it's such a terrible look. I remember just being like, what the fuck? How much did this cost? But there's things like that, like some people in the same complaint again. I think even a bigger complaint about Omega Man, but that it's very 70s. The soundtrack is 70s. The music is very 70s. Like that for the future, it's very 70s. But to me, I think that just adds some extra charm.
I agree 100%. And I think most of the people that listen to us by now, they know our tastes enough.
That's true. I would hope. But but I think, like you said, I think it's, everybody knows the famous ending, the famous quote. If you don't, I mean, obviously you don't, if you're listening to this podcast not expecting spoilers, at this point, I don't know what to tell you, but obviously the whole hook of the ending is that Soylent Green, Tuesdays are Soylent Green Day, which I hate saying that because Green Day, but Soylent Green is people. These rich people are basically taking people from the euthanasia center, turning them into food, and making the poor people eat people food. And that's the whole thing, is that Joseph Cotton's character, he's the one rich guy who may try to save humanity. Just, he's
he knows that he's disturbed. Yes,
disturbed, and he gets killed. But the whole ending is like, I don't know if Charlton Heston is dying, and I've never been clear. He was shot a bunch of times. Like, is he dying? Is he or are they going to say?
I think he's dying at the end, but
me too.
They don't show it to. It's the one out of these three that doesn't make it clear that Charlton Heston dies. And of course, Charlton Heston dies in the sequel to Planet of the Apes, but he's the one who destroys the planet.
I like his death in being the Planet of the Apes. That whole scene is so ridiculous. Woo! Anyways, the ending is that, like, is society going to heed this, his warning that Soylent Green is people? It
seems like he died in vain. I don't think...
That's why thank you, because I've read things that said that it had, like, view the ending as hopeful, but to me it's like,
no, I don't
look at the faces in the crowd. They don't give a shit.
I think that there were a lot of people that didn't hear him, and I think there's a lot of people that just still want their Soylent Green on Tuesdays. Because they're used to. This is their schedule.
They're fucking hungry.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it is like the most depressing of the three films, and God, it's so good. I think I might rewatch it again tonight. I know
I wanted to rewatch it. I really wanted to, because I rewatched. I think at the end of the summer, I watched all of the Planet of the Apes movies. I think I didn't watch the last one, but I'd have to think about it. But so that was recently in my memory, and Omega Man I've seen enough, but like this I hadn't seen in a long time. But I was like, again, it was the one I think of the three that affected me the most, because it's just so depressing, and like, you feel dirty, you feel hungry. It's like the film is very well made. So yeah. And I think it was the perfect one to end on, because of that and stuff, and because of the ending being so sad and cryptic, and the fact that, like, now, like, some people would see that and be like, oh, humanity would never get there. But as we've lived through a global pandemic, and we've seen how stupid people have been globally, not just in the United States, which almost seems to have the patent on stupidity sometimes. But globally, people are selfish and stupid and ignorant and anti-science and all this insanity. So it's not that far-fetched. People, I think, if we got to a point where overcrowding to the point that New York had 40 million people and nobody had food, I think if the humanity even heard, like, hey, McDonald's is people, they'd be like, whatever, McDonald's is tasty or whatever. Like, right. I don't think it would be that. I don't think it's that far fetched anyway.
There would be some asshole who would say, "Is it at least a guy named Mac?"
Exactly.
Sorry,
totally. I just punched my desk. Oh,
don't do that.
No, but anyways, great film. I realized I thought I actually owned Omega Man. I actually don't own Omega Man or Soylent Green, so I'm going to be buying them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they're worthy buys. All three of them are. I know we got to run. I do want to mention just a couple more without diving into them, because there are some movies that Heston made that are adjacent. I originally thought we would call this Chuck Heston's Apocalypse series, but I think Trilogy became a lot more of an accurate term. Yeah. But there are other films. We've already mentioned Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and we've mentioned the Tim Burton 2001 Planet of the Apes, which the best thing I can say about that is at least Charlton Heston was a good sport about getting into the makeup. I don't, but Jesus, what Tim Burton.
I will say this:
like get his cred back up from that one.
I will say this though about the Tim Burton one. I do really think aesthetically, Tim Burton's the aesthetic director, anyways. But I really like the costuming. I love the makeup, but that's the only compliment I will give it.
It's the only good thing about the whole movie, and oddly enough, it was not even nominated that year.
Again, I can't fault that, honestly.
Yeah, I still think it would have been nice for Rick Baker to get noticed.
Oh, absolutely! Rick Baker killed it on that. I mean, he only saving grace, but
yeah,
I mean, the movie's pretty hateable. So.
Then there's Earthquake, which is kind of apocalypse adjacent, but really is much more, like I was texting you about it yesterday saying I think this is really just a soap opera with fire stunts, and if we ever do, and I hope we do, a disaster movie episode, then we'll get more into Earthquake, because it definitely belongs to be discussed in that realm. but it's not.
It's funny
quite...
that it's funny because after you told, because I was trying to say, I was like, I hadn't watched it yet, and I told you my mom, Towering Inferno, Poseidon Adventure, Earthquake, those were my mom's like wheelhouse. Like she loved disaster films, but I found it was actually streaming on an app I had, so I started watching it. I didn't finish it, go all the way through, but it's it's actually a pretty impressive earthquake movie. I mean,
it's fine. It's not a bad movie.
It just got too many goddamn characters. That's my bit. It's like, dude, like how many? It just keeps going from one character to another, and
that's how disaster movies go. That's ultimately
exactly
how disaster movies went away, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
And then of course there's all the stuff about earthquake and the sense around and how it would crack foundations of theaters and give audience members nosebleeds. That stuff's always fun. But then there's two more that were done later on in the 90s that are definitely a part of the Heston apocalypse phase. One of them is Armageddon, which Heston narrates, and that's a clear choice. Michael Bay, I'm not a fan of Michael Bay. I'm not a fan. Armageddon, it's hard to think of another movie that I hated so much the moment I was leaving. Like, I just hated that movie so much as we were walking out of the theater.
Which is weird because I still think it's one of his most likable films.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And that's where I stand on Michael Bay.
Exactly.
I
will say this, though. Pain and Gain, whatever that movie is, it's actually not a bad little movie. I give him credit. It's a pretty fun, stupid, biopic, whatever movie you want to call it. Anyways, go on.
I'll take a look at it, but I'm skeptical. I did like The Rock, but and Bad Boys is okay for a certain mood, like it just once he got, like, Armageddon was really the beginning of the end of Michael Bay for me. Like, it was just like, holy shit, like go and direct a Kodak commercial. That'll be more satisfactory to me in the world.
That's right.
But anyways, I still do give him bonus points for getting Charlton Heston to narrate the opening of that movie, the bit about the dinosaurs and whatever.
Yeah.
But even cooler than that, and definitely in the wheelhouse of this show, Charlton Heston appears in the Mouth of Madness by John Carpenter. And John Carpenter likes to act like he's a curmudgeon and that he doesn't give a shit. But I know that he is a fan of cinema, and that there was a part of him that was geeking out more than he would ever want to show anybody, that he managed to get Charlton Heston to be in his own apocalypse trilogy, which is The Thing, Prince of Darkness, and In the Mouth of Madness. So
one of the greatest unofficial trilogies of all time.
Exactly, and I think that that's a good way to end on our apocalypse unofficial trilogy.
I agree. 100%. I agree with that.
I just think that's the coolest thing ever. John Carpenter is a god, and if he can choose Moses for his movie, then power to him. And we've gotten into that film. Go back to our John Carpenter episode if you actually want to hear our thoughts on In the Mouth of Madness and how much we love that. But
how underappreciated that movie was for the longest time.
Yes.
I mean, Prince of Darkness, I feel the same way. I feel like nobody gave a fuck about that movie for the longest time. And I think in the
The Thing, the whole trilogy was not particularly
The Thing started off unappreciated, but, I think even by the 90s was considered a modern classic. But, Prince of Darkness, nobody gave a fuck about. I think even more people I knew talked about In the Mouth of Madness because a lot of people hated it when it first came out, like legitimately hated it. So where I think Prince of Darkness just kind of came and went, didn't have a lot of
fanfare of any kind.
Yeah, exactly. But it's my favorite it's definitely tied with The Thing. I don't know. It's one of my John Carpenter's one of my favorite directors, and Prince of Darkness is one of my I just love the movie. Anyways, I could talk about that. That's not what this episode's about, and we're trying to wrap it up. I've got the hiccups again. I'm in the mouth of madness right now, so I will let you close.
All right, I'm sorry, James. You got to get yourself a glass of water or something, drink it upside down. Get your wife to scare you or something, since I can't be there to do it myself. But that wraps up our episode on Chuck Heston's Apocalypse Trilogy. Thanks for joining us. That's that's Planet of the Apes, The Omega Man, and Soylent Green. For fans of ours who have not seen any of these movies, in fact, I'm sure all of you have seen at least one of these. But the ones that you haven't seen, please fill in the blanks, because they really are pop culture greats, important in their own right, in their own way.
That's right.
And just before we go, I just want to quickly acknowledge, because we've had such a weird couple of weeks here, the passings of Betty White.
Wow.
Yeah, Betty White, Peter Bogdanovich, Sidney Poitier, and Bob Saget, all over the course of about a week and a half. It's rough.
Yeah, there's even there have been other celebrities, or like pop culture celebrities, whatever. There have been other people who've also. It's almost like every day somebody passes away. So, but obviously Bogdanovich, Sidney Poitier, and Betty White. That's huge. So, great fan of all three of those. So it's definitely sad. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I totally skipped my mind.
Yes.
But,
and Saget as well. I think Saget's.
Absolutely.
Saget's looking down on us with Norm Macdonald, and they're cracking jokes at our expense. And I
have to tell you a story real quick. I think this is a good way to end this. I'm telling the story secondhand. So it's become very well known now. At the time, it wasn't. That Bob Saget actually hung out literally in real life with both Uncle Jesse and with John Stamos and Dave Coulier. Like, they literally were really good friends in real life.
Yeah.
1 and 2, that Bob Saget is really filthy. But my twin brother was at I think it was at not the Mayan. He was at a theater. He was at a concert in LA. I think it was Ben Folds or somebody. I forget who it was, but he was at the urinal, and literally right next to him walked in Bob Saget and Dave Coulier, and they're urinating next to my brother. And Bob Saget goes, "Hey, Dave, did you bring your little cock today or your big cock?" He's like, "Oh, I brought the big cock today. Bob, how are you?" He's like, "I only bring my small cock." Just talking about their cocks and the thing. And my brother's sitting there trying to urinate, also trying not to lose his mind because the Bob Saget and Dave Coulier were next to him talking about their cocks. Anyways,
this was during. I remember when this happened. This was during Full House. This was before people really knew Saget was a filthy fucking comedian.
Filthy man. Yeah,
but
I think it was post. I think it was post Full House, but it was definitely during America's Funniest Home Videos, which is just saccharine and very corny, and here he is talking about his small cock. So, but rest in peace.
He also is an indicator that you can be both of those things simultaneously.
Yeah. He also, I think he has one of the greatest lines in comedy film history, which is, "Weed's not a drug. I suck dick for coke. Did you suck dick for weed? Then weed's not a drug." That's God bless him. Anyways.
All right, and I'm gonna let James go and drink his water and get rid of his hiccups. We will be back soon, possibly with a tribute of some kind to some of these fallen idols who passed so recently. But until then, everybody take care. Make sure you're keeping yourself safe, keep your family safe, keep your neighbors safe. And most importantly, don't forget, Tuesday is Soylent Green Day.
That's right. Happy Soylent Green Day, Devin.
Happy Soylent Green Day, James. Bye, folks.